Do you want to run a great game of Dungeons and Dragons, but not spend hours prepping? Well, that's the topic of our video today here on Templar's Tabletop. Welcome back to the channel where we're all about making your role-playing games AAA. Affordable, approachable, and of course, awesome. I recently finished up an awesome campaign of Dungeon World, and I want to talk about how I maximized the amount of fun that I was having by making sure my ratio of playtime to prep time was just right for me as a game master. Hopefully some of these tips will apply to you, and let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be talking about why might you want to run a low prep campaign, some tips for doing so, including 3 key pillars, a quick recap of the campaign that I recently run, and also some tools that I used near the end that were very helpful for this style of play. Let's dive in. Why would you want to run a low prep game? Sometimes when you hear low prep, that might assume, low passion, or you don't really care about it. It's a side project, or you're not giving a lot of time for your players to have a great time. And that is far from the truth. I actually very much love role-playing games. It is one of my favorite hobbies, and I've got a YouTube channel about it, and I talk about it to a camera in my office. So I really do enjoy it. But there's also a lot of other, responsibilities, commitments, and things that you might have going on in your life. You got family commitments. I have other hobbies I'm interested. I've got work. I've got all of that kind of stuff. And so sometimes my plate or my available time for role-playing games is not as much as I would like. So sometimes there's just time constraints for the amount of prep that you can do. Also, there can be a preference to the level of prep that you want to enjoy. If you're really into highly detailed, rules-heavy games and you like fine-tuning perfect combat encounters, you might actually enjoy that part of the prep as the hobby. However, if you're more like me, I enjoy the story and the development and the interactions, but having to go through and feel like I'm creating a spreadsheet or a detailed itinerary, that can be a little bit less fun for me. And so I actually prefer the low prep style of game. Now, when we're thinking about low prep, you can compare that to something like a detailed, dense adventure module, like something that you'd buy a published module, and then a more homebrew setting and setting up your own world and setting your own plot points and stakes. And so, as we're talking about tips for running a low prep game, the first thing that I want to encourage you to do is lean towards the sandbox style of game. A sandbox game can help you really cut down on your prep time. And what do I mean by sandbox? So, as I mentioned earlier, if you're new to the hobby, you might be picking up something like a published adventure. That's going to give you point by point what happens in the story. All the details are there. And what's nice about that is it's all prepared for you. But on the flip side of that, you have to read through all of that material to adequately prepare and run that session. A sandbox is where you're going to instead create a large area for the players to interact with. You might make some key locations, maybe some key characters that they might meet, and maybe even some random encounter tables, things that they might encounter along the way. One is a little bit more structured, the other is a little bit more freeform. Now, the nice thing about having a pre-prepared adventure, if you're new, you don't have to prepare anything. But if you're playing sandbox, what you can do is you can spend a little less time and paint the big picture, give the areas that they might explore, and then you fill in the details as you go. So point number 1 is, if you want to go low prep, think about the sandbox gaming. Point number 2 is practice your improv skills. So if we're already using that big picture view of the sandbox, now you get to fill in the details, and really, as you play, you get to come up with the characters that they meet. So you might have prepared a really cool cave. Who's in that cave? Come up with it on the fly. You might have some random tables or random generators that can help you prompt some of these ideas. But the big idea here is that you are making stuff up as you go. Is that a less good experience for your players? Well, that depends on your table and how good you are at improvisation. Now, practicing improvisation, that can be a little bit scary for new game masters as well, but I want to encourage you, just like with anything, it's a skill and you can practice it. So check out games that are more improvisational heavy. Find podcasts of people playing, and especially find podcasts of games where people are playing solo role playing. That's like the most niche of niche, even in our niche RPG hobby. How many niches can I put in this video? I digress. But basically, solo role-playing is when people are playing the game by themselves and they need to come up with everything on their own with the help of generators. I promise you, if you watch some of those videos, I highly recommend Me, Myself, and Die with Trevor Duvall. But if you watch some of those videos, you will improve those skills just by hearing people do it. And then last, but certainly not least, I recommend picking a rule system that is going to allow for more flexible play. Now, on this channel, sometimes I get flapped for my rules-heavy gamers. Hey, guys, I love you. Thank you for coming to the channel. Thank you for defending your love in the comments. However, it is more challenging to improvise when you've got the more detailed the enemies are, the more detailed that stats are. That does make it a little bit more challenging to improvise on the fly. So if you do want to run a more low prep game, I recommend picking a system that either you know so well that you can improvise easily, or one that is a bit easier to improvise with, like a Dungeon World. So let's do a quick recap on the campaign that I just ran, and let's give a little view. Also, a little side note here, I thought this was kind of a fun stat. In D&D, most players never get past level 5, and what that suggests to me is that oftentimes campaigns are not actually going for a long amount of time, and I wonder if some of that is that games, especially higher level games, there can be a lot of prep that goes into it. So maybe low prep could save our hobby. Let me know in the comments below if I'm just rambling. But let's talk about the game that I ran. So I ran a game of Dungeon World, and it was on the homebrew world of Akonas. And so this is the map that we used, and I'll just give a little brief recap. So here's a map program that I used to kind of track my map, and then I also kept a little journal of everything that happened. But I'll just give a quick rundown of the stuff that took place. Our party was all headed towards Dragon's Watch, and Dragon's Watch is where a bunch of adventurers were coming to see if they could find dragons that had recently been reappearing on the continent. Each of them had their own reasons for going to Dragon's Watch, but on the way, because of a random table, they met this little goblin named Remus. He was kind of this Brooklyn guy. He had a little Brooklyn accent to him, but it ended up really starting this whole story. They went around the entire map investigating what might actually be happening with these dragon sightings and this mysterious dark stone that was moving around. They made their way to the goblin city of Vogary. They met some elves in the deep woods. They went to the deserts of Konia. They went to the Lone Peak and met the last remaining dragon. They ended up in the Elder Grove and then finally worked their way back to Vogary for an epic final conclusion. And a lot of this stuff was all based off of random tables that I had generated. Now, I had some big picture ideas in mind, but typically what I would do is for each session, I'd prepare a random table of some things that might happen, and then at appropriate times, I would roll. Additionally, I would just, I had some inspiration cards. I've shown them in some previous videos, but they would give me some prompts of various descriptions and adjectives, and I tried to take those prompts and then weave them into the story. So the campaign lasted around 2 years. There was some breaks because of scheduling, and I'd say that's like the biggest thing for getting a campaign done is the scheduling side of things, but we finally finished it, and I thought that the conclusion went pretty well. So yes, that was the recap of the campaign, and let's finish up with some tools that I used, especially near the end. So like I said, big things that can help with low prep improvisational games, random tables. I also like having representations of what they're using, and so you can use that to reference to things. One downside of using low prep games is that you miss a little bit of the cool granularity that you get from things like battle maps, or I don't do a lot of miniatures. I do more things like representative tokens and more theater of the mind. And so I like having some things that can help set the scene, but don't take a lot of time to set up. A lot of the stuff I started off using physical tools, physical note cards. I've talked about zone mapping in the past, but I also, like small tokens, but I moved to using digital because we had access to a TV in the space that we were playing, and I found that it just helped me go quickly. So I showed you guys this already. Here is the mapping tool that I used, and this is something that I can keep track of quests. I can keep track of NPCs on the side, just little notes. And again, just enough notes for me to kind of know what the big picture is and put that in front of the characters. And then for fights, I used this zone mapper tool. In this last battle, they were fighting underneath this mountain, and there was this giant, evil imprisoned giant, and they had to collect these magical items to try to stop the giant from being reawakened. And so basically, the giant was suspended in this huge cavern in the middle of this empty volcano, and they were fighting on these ledges alongside as these creatures were, careening down after them. It was a really cool fight. And I didn't have a detailed battle map for it, but just being able to describe it and then give them a basic sense of that with the zones was really awesome. And what was cool was that I was able to come up with that final fight scene like an hour before the event and just give them the big picture and map it out and use these kind of tools, these quick iterative tools to help me bring it to life for that final session. So, those are my thoughts on low prep campaigns. It's something that can be really fun, and depending on your play style, it might be something that could be a great fit for your group. So for you players out there, I encourage you work with your game masters, make it a collaborative experience, contribute to the world. And for you game masters, my final encouragement is don't be afraid to cut down on some of that prep time so you can still have a lot of fun time. Because I've at least experienced you can have a very fun campaign where you don't have to spend hours and hours prepping. But what do you all think? Am I way off base here? Do you need to have great prep to actually have a successful campaign? Or is low prep the new wave of the future? Please let me know in the comments below. And one final Easter egg, if you might be interested in ever playing a game with me, I'll include a link to my Start Playing profile where you can, in fact, contact me to get to play a game of your own. And for those following the channel, you know this is a very monumental milestone. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Sorry it's been a bit since the video, but 2026 is here and we are ready to make some more great RPG content for you. So until next time, happy gaming and God bless.